Zoe, when I first heard you written the film in which you played the dream girl, I thought it sounded a bit narcissistic.
It does sound. I worried so much about that. I was like, oh my God, people are going to think I'm so high on myself. But she's not the dream girl or even a dream girl. She's his dream girl, which I think is very different. You know, I think, you know, for me, like, you know, my first crushes were all pretty unconventional. And, you know, I know I'm like no Kelly LeBrock. This is not weird science. It's much more a dream of real love, you know, with a real person.
And also I then saw the film and saw what you put your character through. Was the plan always to include emotional devastation?
Yes, I mean, I think I couldn't write a movie where a man has total control over a woman and not have explore the darker sides of that arrangement.
I think I first saw you in Me and Orson Welles, in which you play an aspiring writer. So it's interesting that you're now, you know, writing a film about a writer's life.
You know, I mean, my parents are writers, so I think I experienced firsthand both how mundane that job is and, you know, how harrowing it can be. And then obviously I write, and you know, we have a lot of friends who are writers. I, for better or worse, have been surrounded by them my whole life.
Was there ever a temptation to make her the writer and him the creation?
No, you know, people ask me about that a lot, and I think that's just a very different story. For me, I wanted to write about my experience that I've had in relationships of feeling sort of put on a pedestal by my partner, and that there was some idea of sort of femininity or womanhood that I was being expected to live up to, and how lonely that can feel and what a burden that can feel. And, you know, if I flipped the genders, I wouldn't get, that wouldn't be the same story that I was trying to tell.
Ruby, the character, is unpredictable, but she doesn't seem to have a mean bone in her body. She's never mean to any other human or animal. Was it important that she had this kind of essential goodness?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I think of her as being very kind and also sort of very open to new experience. She's a really flexible person. And for me, that was important because obviously Calvin wrote her character, and so he's writing something that he thinks he needs. He's a very inflexible person. He's very closed down to new experience. He's very fearful of the world. So I thought it was sort of moving and interesting that he wrote someone for himself so different than himself that could kind of maybe help pull him out of his shell or change his life in some way. But the ways in which she's good for him, maybe he's not as good for her.
I have to ask you about Ruby's colourful dress sense. So again, is that part of the fiction, or is it basically how you dress? Oh,
no, it's not how I dress at all. I think that was a choice that Jonathan and Valerie made with the costume designer Nancy Steiner, who's very talented. She did Little Miss Sunshine, also like Virgin Suicides, many movies. And they talked about, you know, the color palette of Calvin's world is very white and beige, and sort of the colors of his paper and typewriter, and everything is in this sort of monochromatic tone. And then she comes in and is obviously like a very literal splash of color in his life. So that had more to do with their visual sense than my dress sense. And
Ruby also appears to be a character who has music wherever she goes. Did you have any, you know, did you approve of the soundtrack choices?
I loved the soundtrack. They worked with a wonderful music supervisor and a great composer, and for me, the music helps tie the movie together and sort of, you know, one thing they said is that the movie is very small in scope. It's sort of almost claustrophobic, 2 people in a house, and that the music has a kind of more operatic scale. I like that dichotomy.
It's a story about bringing a character to life who then needs to have a life of their own. Does this mean Ruby is still walking around out there and we may see her again?
Well, I think, you know, that looks like the most fictional part of the movie, but, you know, I, like, sat in my apartment in Brooklyn and had an idea and wrote it down, and now it's, like, a thing in the world, so, which people will go see without me ever being there, and, you know, literally is walking around in the world now, so I don't think it's so far-fetched.
Thank you so much, Zoe.
Thank you.